Hey, this is Ariel, and you're listening to the Cyber PR Music Podcast, dispatches for the new music business.
Hello. I hope everyone is staying safe, staying hunkered down. I hope you're putting your masks on when you leave your house. I am very, very, very excited. I have someone who has been an acquaintance for a long time and a musician who I deeply admire. His name is Dan Mangan. If you follow my blog at cyberprmusic.com, you may well know him because I have oftentimes mentioned him as someone who has a really, really good sense of how to use his artist newsletter. And he started as a DIY artist, and I just love his work ethic and the way that he's built his career. Dan is a 2-time Juno Award-winning and 2-time Polaris Music Prize-listed musician. He's from Vancouver, so he's Canadian, and he lives there with his wife. He's scored TV shows for Netflix, CBC, and AMC, as well as Hector and The Search for Happiness, a feature film starring Simon Pegg. Mangan has released 5 studio LPs, a handful of EPs, and has spent more than a decade touring extensively around North America, Europe, and the UK and Australia. Again, he got his start as a DIY musician, and that's how I know him. These days, he has co-founded a very interesting project called StageDoor. For those of you that want to know about how to make more money live streaming, that's what Dan is here to talk about. How's your quarantine?
It's been weird in that my touring career is at a complete halt. Right. And yet my, StageDoor, which began as this sort of passion project, has now become like 2 full-time jobs. So in a weird way, I'm busier than ever, but I just never leave my studio here. So.
All right. So I want to get right into it. Before we talk about StageDoor and what you've been doing on that side of the house, my community is well aware of you because every time I talk about a newsletter, I love mentioning you. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about do you still consider yourself very much a DIY artist?
Yeah, I think so. I think, there's that whole analogy in politics, like the way that you win an election is the way that you rule. So if you win an election by being a dirty, rotten scoundrel, then that's how you're going to rule. Pertinent now. But in general, I think it's the same way. Like if I have achieved an audience through that means, it's hard to like switch gears and all of a sudden become, a cog in a wheel. My team is really respectful of me. They kind of let me drive the bus. And I've always been hands-on. It's hard for me to let go of the wheel, to be honest. And maybe to my detriment on some level. Maybe if I just let my team run things, maybe I'd be, wildly more popular. I don't know. But I have wondered it. And I feel like of the Venn diagram of success in the music industry, talent is like over here. And then like ambition and, smarts or like kind of street smarts is over here. And then sometimes they overlap, and if you can kind of hit somewhere in the middle, then that's great. Yeah.
Do you consider yourself a business mind?
I do, actually, and I think it took me a long time to come to terms with that. I think for a long time I was like, oh no, I'm not like a real artist because I actually think and care about the business side of it. But early on I had this whole thing about like, okay, if I'm going to do music, I'm going to treat it like I opened a cafe. And if you opened a cafe, you would think about like, what do the seats feel like? What font is on the wall? What kind of glass display case do you use? What kind of coffee do you serve? And you would be there 16 hours a day, every single day for the first 2 years until it got off the ground. And so I kind of used that as my North Star with music and thinking, okay, well, I know this is what I want to do. It brings me a lot of joy. If I can make a living doing this, that'd be great. And so, I think kind of getting over that hump, that sort of mental philosophical hump of like, oh no, I've created a business out of this thing that I care so deeply about and is my, how I articulate my innermost truth in my soul. Now have I sullied it? And the truth is that there has to be some overlap there. Like there has to be a marriage between those things. And I think that, every different artist might judge their own success based on how well they have found a balance in a place where they feel good. You know, some people are geared far off on one side and it's all business all the time. And, you know, people write songs for them and they don't care. And they just kind of like, it's like a meat grinder. And some people are over here toiling away in their basement and they never played to more than 20 people, but man, are they good. And there's this sort of like, everyone else falls in between, you know?
Yeah. How did you learn the business stuff? Did you read a lot of books? Did you go to school for this? Like, did you actually, I know for
Yep.
me, I started, my PR firm out of passion. I really love music, and, I couldn't get a job in the music business. So I made one up. And then a couple years in, I realized, okay, this is like not a hobby. This is like, I
Yeah.
probably make some money. And it was a tough learning curve because I went to theater school. So I didn't have like, a business background. I had to learn about return on investment. And if I spent 100 hours and I charged someone $100, that wasn't good. All those things. Did you self-educate on the business side of your house?
You like slam your head into a wall enough times, eventually you kind of, I think, a lot of it was born out of being stubborn and persistent and having no money. For instance, I needed a website. I had no money to hire someone to build a website. So I figured out how to make one myself. And like, back in the early 2000s, I learned how to use HTML and build a website. It was a terrible website, but it got me to the next step. And the same thing with working with Photoshop, for instance, building like a one page or, I remember like uploading PDFs to like Sonic bids back in the day. And you had to figure out how to make things look good. And so I learned how to use Photoshop, and I didn't take any classes. I just did it terribly until it got a little bit better. So I think that, you could apply that across the board. I booked my first tour on MySpace, literally messaging venues that I found on MySpace. And I would put in the gig listing, Calgary, venue TBA, message me if you want to host me in Calgary kind of thing. And I would almost like in a weird way, I mean, strangely, that's what StageDoor kind of is. It's like this marketplace for hosting shows and putting on shows. But early on MySpace, I was kind of doing that in a way, and just trying to book tours. And I was like, I know I'm going to be in this area at this time. So if you want to host me, let me know. And then I'd reach out to venues in that area. So I think that by the time I actually had a booking agent, I booked myself enough tours that I knew if they were doing a good job. I've often said, and anytime I'm talking to a young band and they're like, how do we get a manager? And you're like, well, that's kind of like asking, how do I get like a spouse? Like you wouldn't walk down the street and go like, anyone want to marry me? Come on, we're open for marriage. And I think when you're getting going, that's how you feel. You're just like, oh man, I would take any manager. And the truth is that you're going to be talking to this person every day. You're going to be talking about art. You're going to be talking about money. There's going to be trust involved. They're going to have to speak for you when you're not around. And therefore you need to believe that they are going to be composed in a demeanor that looks good on you. And so you kind of have to like do it yourself. You have to be single, and you have to be good at being single, and you have to be not desperate, and you have to just like believe that what you are doing is of value. And when someone finds you, like your manager, like nobody in the whole world believes that you are worthy of success more than you. You know what I mean? Like you should feel like you can do it. You could be the next Bjork or Paul Simon or whatever. And if your manager doesn't carry that same kind of enthusiasm, it's going to be a short relationship. Like let's say they are a successful manager. Let's say they manage Coldplay or something, and you have caught their interest for 10 seconds. And they're like, yeah, I'll manage this person. If all of their buddies in the music industry don't agree that you're a star in the first 3 months, they're just going to stop returning your emails. You need somebody that has a balanced sort of belief in you, where they want to put their extra hours in. They want to be making phone calls at 9 p.m. on your behalf. And I think that it takes a certain amount of time where you exude quality at a level where all of a sudden that becomes a natural sort of relationship.
Yeah. So early on in your career, when you were doing the MySpace thing and you couldn't get the venues, I know you were a huge proponent of playing art galleries, playing people's homes. Like you would just, wherever you showed up, you would make it happen regardless of whether or not there was a venue there. Does that play into your life today in any way, or have you've gotten to a level where it's all venues all the time?
I mean, it depends, right? I mean, we get to play big theaters in Canada, in theory. Less so in America or less so in Europe, you know. So, and I think that everywhere you go, you have to cut your teeth again. I'll tell a story about my first gig in Calgary was at a place called the Ironwood, and I begged them for months to let me come and play, and they did. And I came and I played in Calgary, and I'd never been there before. I didn't know anyone there, and so there's like 4 people at the show, and made no money and lost money just getting there, etc. Of course. And what did I expect? And then 6 months or so later, I got invited through a friend of a friend to come and play in this guy's backyard, this guy Doug. And there's like 60 people there, and they don't know who I am, but they're friends with him. So that's why they're there. And then I play, and it goes great. And I made like $600-700 and sold a bunch of CDs and had a bunch of drinks and made a bunch of friends. And it was like, oh man, this is great. And then I realized like, oh, it's not necessarily the venue I need, it's Doug. Like I need a Doug in every city. I need someone to hold up a spark that I can fan into a flame.
Right.
I need that first 60 people that I can turn into 100 to 200 to 400 to 1,000. And it's really hard to go from 4 to 1,000, but it's easier to go from 60 to 1,000, you know? And so that was like an early on idea for SideDoor. And, you know, if we can kind of equate SideDoor in its pre-pandemic state as like, you know, Airbnb for gigs, in that like any space can be a venue. Artists sign up, they connect with venues, you book a show, you negotiate a split, you put the tickets on sale, you get paid out automatically based on your split. And that was sort of like the device of how we built SideDoor. And we ran about 700 shows through the platform, 2,500 artists, 900 venues in North America. And we were like ready to launch in, you know, in America in a big way. And we had this big partnership with South by Southwest. But it all came back from that early experience of playing in Doug's backyard and going like, okay, like if your footprint can't be wide, if I can't sell 1,000 tickets, at least let my footprint be deep, you know, like a fox paw in the snow. Like let it be memorable to those 60 people in a way that is powerful and special. So that philosophy, you know, I truly believe that a really high quality engagement with a small amount of people is far more valuable than a very like narrow amount of engagement with a huge group of audience. So as SideDoor has shifted into online shows, we focused on the same thing: interactivity, engagement, humanity, community, over just trying to broadcast to the biggest possible audience.
Yeah, amen to that. You know, I think one thing I've said often throughout this pandemic is the thing that I've really noticed with the artists that are figuring out how they're going to survive this time versus the artists. Well, if you were touring full time, it's really hard, of course. But what I have seen is the artists that had taken the time to deeply connect with, even if it was a small community of people, they are just seeing a different result. Because when all the stuff hit the fan and when there was clearly going to be no touring, the ones who could get onto their email lists and the ones who could deeply communicate were the ones who in the earliest days were having already monetized live shows. And it's all about fan engagement, especially the path to getting paid and to sustainability.
Particularly right now, you know, it's like if I put on a live stream on Facebook, I get, you know, day 2 of the pandemic, I was getting like, you know, people are like, oh, I got $500 in donations. It's amazing. You know, week 3, it's $25. And so it was like early on, we thought, well, okay, what is the sustainable model here? And is it that you put on a broadcast from home with fairly relatively low engagement? You know, what we've done is incorporated Zoom into SideDoor so that, you know, you integrate your Zoom account with your SideDoor account. We book the show automatically. We provide access to everybody automatically. And it's totally secure ticketing now where you can sell up to 1,000 tickets. And each one of those tickets that you sell creates one unique instance in that Zoom show. And people enter through our like secure ticketing portal. And it's a very unique and robust sort of integration that allows you to have this interactive thing. And so in Zoom, when I'm playing a show right here in my studio, I can see the audience. The audience can see each other. And every show is totally unique. Like there's one show where there's like a dog humping another dog, or there's one show where people are knitting, and then at the end of the show they put up what they just knit, or people are baking or crying or dancing or laughing, and there's kids and there's families and there's people who are alone, and it's humanity in a jar. And so the performance, like the music, that's the magnet, that's like the thing that drew them in, that's the nucleus of the situation. But it's actually not the end experiential thing that you're purchasing. The thing that you're purchasing is to feel like you are part of something scarce and beautiful and human and imperfect for 90 minutes, let's say, and then it's over. And then art in mirroring life, in mirroring existence, is scarce and beautiful, and one day it's going to be over, rather than on demand, everything when you want it. Actually, I don't like this song, I'm going to skip through it. Like, to actually be forced to be engaged with an audience. And you know, it's one thing to love a performer, but it's actually something more beautiful to love being a part of a community that loves that performer. That's the same reason why, you know, if you're going to go to a Winter Sleep show, you might wear a Winter Sleep shirt, is because you're with your people. You know, this is my tribe. This is where I feel understood in this context. And so with these shows, what we're finding is that people keep coming back every single time you do a show and you announce a show. Everyone goes and buys tickets, because it's not just another live stream playing a slightly different set list. It's actually a new experience that is going to be unique to that moment.
So walk us through, for those that are not familiar with SideDoor yet, how does one get involved? Is simply just go to the website, sign up? Take the newbie through, would you?
Sure. So it takes just a couple of minutes to set up an artist profile. And once you do that, you upload a photo and description, and you can put your Spotify in there. You can put your Apple or your SoundCloud. You can put your YouTube link in there, so that like on your page there's a bit of media. And then you can go and you can set up an online show. Now, SideDoor's a marketplace, so there's venues and there's promoters, there's kind of presenters, as we call them. And they can help you put on your show. And in doing so, you know, you can have a split with them. You can give them 5, 10, 15, whatever percentage you want. And so you can do it two ways. You can self-promote a show, and in that way you can probably get it online in just a couple of minutes. Or if you like, you can work with one of those people. And so that requires you going almost like LinkedIn. Like, you have to send them a message. If they accept your message, well, now you're in each other's connections. So you can go to your connections, you can message with people, you can set up shows. So there's kind of two lanes there. And then once you get into, let's say you want to set up a self-promoted show, because that's the way that you can do it really quickly, you can do it through Zoom, and you can use our Zoom integration, or you can do just any link you want. And so the Zoom stuff is secure. Like that, you know, specific ticket that people buy gets them into that show. If you want to do a YouTube show or what have you on an unlisted YouTube live, you can do that on SideDoor. You can ticket that, but it's also not secure. That link can be compromised. Obviously, people who are at the show can then go and share that link on Twitter or send it to their friends or what have you. And so I feel like there's sort of two types of broadcasting that are going on right now in live streams. One is put some thought into the production. It's a 3-camera shoot. It's expensive. It's on a sound stage. Sounds great, looks great. You're basically putting on a TV show with a chat function. And that can be done really, really well. I saw a Brandy Carlisle show that was just fantastic. It reminded me like a Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton, like Christmas show. It felt like, you know, we're going to put on this extravaganza for you. And that was done really, really well. And that kind of thing, I think you could kind of do more sparse. Like, it's hard to do that every week kind of thing. People, they tire of it. They're like, okay, well, I've already seen this. And so we leaned into the other thing, which is the Zoom model. And so we put all of our sort of development money and time into making the Zoom integration as powerful and unique as possible. So really, like, you know, if you're going to use SideDoor, my recommendation is just go with what we do really well. And that's to put on one of these Zoom shows. And then, you know, as you book your show and you get it up live, we serve you some show tips, some education. We can help you figure out your audio settings. Zoom, tell you this, is a pain in the ass. It's like, you know, it's used for this massive like business conferencing thing, but what we need it for is this very narrow amount of what it's actually capable with it. So you don't need annotation. You don't need the audience to be able to screen share. You know, all these, it's just like, you just want to be able to put on your show. And so we help you sort of mitigate all that and figure it all out. And it's a bit of a mountain to climb. We kind of consider ourselves to be the Sherpa that helps you up the mountain that first time. And then it happens with most artists after that very first show, they're like, oh my God, that was way more rewarding than I ever thought an online show would be. I've had moments in my studio here in the middle of a show where I'm like on the verge of tears. I've just talked to somebody in Argentina who told me this beautiful story of like, getting deep with one of my records 8 years ago as they were coming out of the closet as their boyfriend was killed in a motorcycle accident, and how that album helped them with their grief. And like, I'm here talking face to face with somebody in Argentina who thought that they would never get to see me play live. And now because of the pandemic, they've seen me play several times. And now we've met, and I know their face, and they've had a portal into my world, into my space, into my home. There really is a silver lining to this moment. And when it comes to online shows, rather than just treating it like a crappy version of a real show, we've really leaned into this medium and said, okay, what can you get out of this? Using a co-host, like having a moderator, someone who can help run the tech while you're focusing on performing. And we've even gotten into the thing where like you can send an email before the show to the moderator and if you want to share a story. So during the show, my co-host Mark will be like, he'll just interrupt me in between songs. He'll be like, hey, Dan, I'm going to bring up Carol here, and she's going to tell a story about her daughter's wedding or something like that. And up comes Carol, and lo and behold, her daughter is also on the show, beaming in from Paris, and they're both on the show together. And she's dedicating a song to her daughter, and they tell a story about the daughter's wedding and playing one of my songs during the first dance or something like that. And so it really feels like here we are, this is a community. And, rather than just this,
Right.
Music's good, but I honestly believe that the community around music is why it makes it feels good.
So you're choosing to bring your audience in and actually take the mic, as it were, and get involved by sharing their experience of the community and your music. Walk us through the financial side just for a moment, if you would. So do you recommend you have to have a paid version of Zoom in order to participate well with SideDoor?
Okay, so you can use SideDoor with a free Zoom account. However, the show won't be secure. The show link could be compromised. And that's because essentially what SideDoor does is it creates a instantaneous registration situation on the back end between Zoom and SideDoor. So SideDoor pings Zoom with a registration request. Zoom pings it back to SideDoor. SideDoor checks it against the ticket manifest. SideDoor pings it back to Zoom and says yes or no. Zoom pings back a unique single instance link that you are then redirected into the app with. And so in order for that to work, you have to have a pro account, which is $15 a month. So at the very least, yes, I would recommend that you have a pro Zoom account. It's $15, and that gets you the secure feature with SideDoor. Now, the next hoop to jump through is capacity. So that gets you 100 people. If you want to have up to 500 people, it's $50 a month. And if you want to have up to 1,000 people, it's $90 a month. So for people who are doing a show a month and they're selling 600 tickets, and it's sort of a wash. It's a cost of doing business, and it's very minimal. If you're just getting going, maybe that feels a bit more intimidating. But what you can do is you can put a show on sale, make the capacity 1,000, and then see how it sells. And based on ticket sales, if you've sold 300 tickets, well, paying for that extra $50 to add capacity is not that big a deal. And so you can kind of adjust your account settings prior to the show so that it can handle the capacity.
And then does SideDoor take a percentage of ticket sales, or how are you monetizing your side of the house?
Yep. So SideDoor takes 10% of net ticket sales. So that's after the credit card processing fees from Stripe, and that's after PRO fees. So we actually pay PROs for you. And this is a really complicated situation because PROs are supposed to be paid. This is like ASCAP, BMI, or SOCAN, et cetera.
By the venue, traditionally.
Exactly. And so, this is sort of like a weird new Wild West, and people should be paying PROs and remitting that money because technically they're liable for it. So the PROs could come after artists and could come after companies who are putting on live streams for large amounts of money and not remitting. And so what we do is we hold that in escrow, and then we take a look at who bought tickets. And let's say 20% of your audience is in Canada and 60% is in the UK and 40% is in America. Well, then 20% needs to go to SOCAN. 40% needs to go to the PRS in the UK, and 40% needs to go to ASCAP BMI in the United States. And that's really complicated. So that's one thing that we kind of handle for you. We collect that money and we distribute it on your behalf. So after credit card fees and PRO fees, then you have the net, the subtotal. We take 10% of that, and the other 90% either just goes to the artist or goes to the artist and the presenter in whatever sort of split that they've negotiated.
Amazing. Do you have your moderator in the same room with you or on a separate screen? So could they be in the same room?
It's actually better if they're portaling in from somewhere else. So my moderator, Mark, he does it from home, and he's just a bit of a Zoom wizard, and he's a great host, and he has a very deep philosophical approach to how to facilitate an experience. And so with Zoom, I mean, that's kind of the handy thing. It's like we'll log in half an hour before the show starts. I'll make him a co-host on the show. Then he has the sort of overlord powers. We'll sort of do a quick line check. Yep, sounds good. Okay, great. We'll put up a pre-show. So he'll put up a full screen image of sort of like, show begins at such and such o'clock. Thanks for tuning in. Here's some Zoom tips. And he'll play records, whether it's like maybe the guest from our previous week. He'll put it on Spotify through the screen share in Zoom. So we have a bit of a pre-show, and I'll go, warm up, make some tea or whatever. And then at showtime, I just turn on my video, unmute myself. And it's great because he can sort of keep people muted. He can moderate the chat thread. He can keep an eye on what's going on there. And all the meanwhile, I can just focus on playing, and I just don't have to worry about like clicking things. Basically, it's just clicking things out of my purview.
So does StageDoor provide a moderator, or do I have to provide my own?
So we can help connect you with moderators. We're actually building out a side of the site for service providers. So that's like moderators, online sound checks. If this was an in-person show, it could be a photographer, it could be a cleaner, it could be gear rental, anything. And so we're sort of building out that part of the marketplace so that you could actually go and find people right on StageDoor who could do that. Like, almost like people could advertise like, these are the services I do. You can hire me for your gig. So that's in the pipeline. In the meantime, we do have sort of like a small army of people that have just gotten really good at it. But, lots of artists, they just might want their manager to do it, or, somebody on their team. If they don't have a manager, their friend or their spouse or their, boyfriend, girlfriend.
It could also be a really great gift if you have a super fan who's been a great supporter. Yeah. I would do a test run, make sure they're articulate and they don't get freaked out, because not all super fans are used to being in front of the camera, but it could be a very cool way to lift up someone in your community who's been loyal to you. Can multiple players play, like a band who are not in the same room? Do you have the capability for multiple artists?
The latency issue is just too great at this point. I think that the tech will come along. I think someone's going to figure that out. To be able to, and I know that there are people much smarter than me working on the tech of creating that sort of situation where you could play remote. But right now, no, all the performers kind of have to be in the same location. You can take turns, and that's something that's been going on a lot. It's sort of like singer-songwriter in the round. Or on all of my shows, I'll have a surprise guest. So halfway through the show, I'll just be like, and here's Charlotte Cornfield. And, Charlotte's at home in Toronto. She plays a few songs, high fives. But, that's also kind of one of the cool things about this medium, is that you can just sort of like beam people in from anywhere and take turns. But you can't collaborate. You can't sing together. You can't play at the same time. Not yet. Yeah. Maybe one day. Yeah.
Very cool.
The Zolas did one where Zach, who's the singer, he sang all the songs, but the other three guys in the band were all there, like in the meeting. And so in between, they'd kind of, shoot the shit and talk about stories from the tour or whatever. And people would ask questions and they would sort of feel them. So it was like they were all there, even though only one of them was performing.
Right, you could do like a Bluebird Cafe style too, is do an in the round, which I always love, when ASCAP and BMI does their feature performances. It's always a great way, because if you bring your fan base and they bring their fan base might not be used to a new artist yet. So to listen to one song is a lot easier than to listen to 20 or 30 minutes of an artist you're unfamiliar with, when your person is going to come back in 3 or 4 more. So I always love that format for introducing new artists. How would you, obviously talking about it in your newsletter, is there do you recommend a set ticket price? Do you ask people to pay what they feel the right amount is? Like, how have people been structuring the accepting of the money part?
I would say one of the biggest things that we've learned is that all of the same rules apply as the real world. You need to market your show with a significant kind of value proposition. Like what is unique about this show? Is it the fan engagement? Is it the all request hour? Is it that you're playing an album front to back? Is it that, you're going to be interviewing your songwriter hero partway through? Well, what is the thing about this? Have some marketing assets. Scarcity is a real thing. So, for instance, I was playing a show every week for about 6 weeks, and I was selling between 400 and 600 tickets a show, which is awesome. And then I took 3 weeks off, and then I came back and I said, okay, I'm going to do Nice, Nice, Very Nice front to back, which is the album that kind of changed my life about a decade ago, and sold 2 shows out immediately, like within a couple days, 950 tickets each. And it was sort of like, okay, that was a learning moment of like, interesting. So take a bit of a break, create some scarcity. And I was like, oh, it's just like a real show. Like if you play Chicago every month, you're going to sell less and less and less tickets. But if you play Chicago every 12 to 18 months, well, maybe each show is going to get bigger and bigger. And so supply and demand is still real online. All of the same rules about how a show is successful or not. Did you do a sound check? Are you front lit? Do you have an Ethernet cable? You should be hardwired for these shows. You should have an upload speed of at least 5 megabytes minimum. So all of these things, you kind of have to, as I said, climb that mountain. It's a bit of a tricky thing the very first time, but you need to approach it with the same care, the same value, and the same reverence as you would a real show. Prepare for it in the same way. And think about what kind of experience you want people to have. Like maybe you're the kind of artist that actually really thrives behind the smoke and mirrors, and you don't want any interaction. You're not an earnest person, and you want to sort of just be mysterious. That's fine. And so think about how it's going to feel to interact in this show. Or let's say you're someone who, like me, who just sits there with a guitar and talks to people and plays songs. Well, I know that that's my strength. So I know that that's the kind of show that I'm going to put on. But you really do have to think about it in that way. And in terms of ticket price, it's interesting. Like at the very beginning of the pandemic, I think everyone was scared to charge more than like $6 for something like this. And as we've gotten deeper and deeper into it, it's become more customary for, I'd say, $10 to $20. And if you're just starting out and, you're worried about getting people in, sure, you can charge less. But if you have an audience, the truth is that a lot of people have been charging a ticket price, but then also putting their PayPal in the chat if people want to donate. And one thing we're working on is sort of like a pay what you can model where people can set their price if they want to. And, my moderator, Mark, put my PayPal link in the chat. And while I'm playing the show, I got like a ding on my phone. Somebody PayPal'd me $500 during the show. And I was like mind blown. Like, some people can't afford anything. Some people are really hurting right now. Right. And so for them, I give away 30 guest list spots every show. Just like, no questions asked, just email this email and you will be invited to the show. You can send comps from within StageDoor. And so I do that for 30 people a show. If you can't afford this $10, don't worry about it. I got you. But then there's other people on the other side that are like, they've got job security and they make good money and they've loved your music for a decade and they want to show you how much it means to them. On that side of it, some people want to pay $500 for a ticket.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, give them that opportunity. Yeah, exactly.
Have any artists been donating a piece to charity or doing full-on charity shows? Is that something that's been happening?
Definitely. There's even been like variety hours where like a charity will organize an event and they'll get like, 5 or 8 artists to each do 2 songs or something like that. And all the proceeds will go to charity. We've had our mainland concert series going on that's sponsored by Rogers. And it's all artists from the greater Vancouver area. There's 10 of them. And they get a flat fee from Rogers as the sponsor. And then 100% of their ticket sales is going to charities. I think that's been definitely a part of the culture, is sort of like, not that needs to happen, but that certainly that's been happening. And I think it's really interesting. And I think it's cool in the idea that, art can be a way to help artists survive, but it can also be a way to build understanding and awareness about a cause.
Yeah. And then my final question, we interviewed an amazing artist who I'm going to introduce you to, named Rich Aveo. And Rich started something called the Pandemic Piano Hour. So he's a piano, he's a singer-songwriter and has his own originals, but makes a lot of his money doing piano bar stuff, like wine bar. And lo and behold, this whole horror show hit, and he just took the show onto Facebook, and he streams on YouTube and other channels, but he's up to 140 shows. He's just been doing it 4 nights a week consistently, and it's become amazing. He's got a huge community. He takes requests, and he's been doing something very creative and cool during the show. He has a VIP upsell moment where he says, hey, if you'd like me to record a song for a friend for their anniversary or a birthday, there's a link here. You can pay an extra amount of money. It's like 40 or 50 bucks, and he records it. And he's also putting merch into his shows. He's using OBS, so it's a little bit complicated with the software, but it's been working. Mm-hmm. Like you said, you give people an opportunity to give more. Have you seen anyone doing creative things with merch or special moments in there?
Totally. And you can plug OBS right into Zoom as well. So you can kind of run... Yeah, you can run like a complicated tech setup and then plug it in right into Zoom. So you still get the community vibe. Absolutely. And I think that was right out of the gate, I think it was Joe Pug or another songwriter was sort of he had integrated his Calendly with Shopify, with Zoom, and was kind of essentially doing what StageDoor has now automated for you, taking these various complicated things and putting them together. And now we've built it so that it's plug and play. But I think that scarcity breeds innovation, and I think that crisis breeds opportunity. And I think coming out of this, now that I've done this, I will probably do an online show at least once a month for the rest of my life. Why not? They're beautiful. When I finish it, I feel like I just got off stage. I feel like I had a real human experience, and it's rewarding and it's powerful. And I love the idea that this thing that I had never even considered doing a few months ago has now become a rewarding element of my artistic life, and it's just going to go on and on. And now there's people who have not missed a single one of my shows, from India, Argentina, Estonia, Switzerland, China. There's people beaming in on these shows. There's somebody got up at 5 a.m. or something Australia time so that they could watch from Sydney. This is amazing. This is a worldwide community. It's like taking the front row of every one of my shows of all the places I tour, and then even some places I don't tour, and putting them all in a room. I'm going to keep doing it,
Very cool. Where can everybody find StageDoor? Obviously, I will put tons of links when this goes up on our blog, but what's the best way to connect?
StageDoorAccess.com and StageDoor.access on Instagram. We're pretty easy to find out there. If you look for StageDoor, sign up, create a profile. Just takes a few minutes. It's really, really easy.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time, Dan Mangan.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
For more information and show notes, please visit us at cyberprmusic.com.